Good evening, my friends. We are back this Wednesday on the ARCA Racing Podcast. I am so glad to be back with you guys. It's been so long. It feels like the Daytona test was so long ago, and obviously we haven't been full-time since last October. It's great to be back here. Of course, I'm your host, Colby Evans. Welcome to the show. We have a bunch to go over. The Daytona, what a wacky race we had. Great racing overall, an amazing underdog winner, and lots of great storylines that'll take us into a very, very fun 2023 season that we're all going to go over today. I'm going to go through my little intro that we usually go through on this show, and we'll get right into the action. So you guys know the drill, of course. Follow me on social media, Twitter at Start and Park Car on Twitter. Colby, if you're a fan of the low-budget racing meet, if you're a fan of low-budget team pictures, I'm your guy. I am your guy. I love posting that stuff. I've been a fan of the lower-budget teams ever since I started watching NASCAR. Give Brock Beard a shout out at LastCrownBrock on Twitter and at NASCARman_RR. Give them a follow. They're two good friends of the show. And of course, check out theracingexperts.com. That is my media friends website for all ARCA and NASCAR content. They are just trying to get some more support for that page. So let's get right into it, shall we? The 2022 Brant 200. Now, obviously, we didn't do a preview show last week because I was in Daytona and I simply just didn't have any time whatsoever to do a preview show. So I do apologize for that, number one. No time to do a preview show. But unfortunately, Lucas Oil had ended their partnership with this race. It was no longer called the Lucas Oil 200. I was worried for a second that we wouldn't get a sponsor for this race, but I'm like, man, the ARCA race did struggle to get a sponsor back in the late 90s. For a lot of the times, it was called the Daytona ARCA 200. But I figured, in this day and age with social media and marketing like this, I just don't see how ARCA could run Daytona and not have a sponsor. I mean, Daytona is such a prestigious race. I can't think of any organization that wouldn't want to sponsor this race. And luckily, longtime NASCAR sponsor for Justin Allgaier came forward and sponsored this race. So not the Lucas Oil 200, but the Brant 200, which still has a pretty decent ring to it. And I'm just glad to see this race get sponsorship. I did not want to see it untitled. So thank you. Shout out from all the ARCA fans. Shout out to Brant for sponsoring that race. And I had reported it multiple times on social media. Many people had as well that this was going to be a big entry list field, and it did not disappoint. The initial entry list came out with 41 cars on this entry list. By far the biggest entry list we had seen at Daytona since 2017, when I believe we had 42. Now, there were going to be some caveats to this entry list. The 01 of Andres Perez de Lara. I know I botched his name. I just don't know how to pronounce it correctly. So excuse my pronunciation issues. That's how I'm just going to pronounce it. He is not 18 yet. So he was not allowed to compete in this race. However, ARCA does have a rule. We have seen this in the past where they will at least let the driver show up to Daytona, make one practice lap around the apron. Now, he won't be able to start the race or do qualifying. But by ARCA rules, when you make one practice lap, you can not necessarily withdraw from the race, so to say, but as much as be credited as a did not start, where you will still receive, I believe it's 3 points. 3 points. And we've seen this before with Riley Herbst in 2017, Brandon Grosso in 2018, and I believe Will Rogers even did this one time. Maybe 2020. I don't quite remember, 2019 maybe, but it has been done before. And the main part is it's to keep these guys in the championship battle because Andres will be turning 18 before Talladega. He'll be running the final 19 races. But luckily what this will do is this will keep, because as you guys know with ARCA's point standings, they get bonuses for every 5 races. And if Andres did not do that practice lap at Daytona, he wouldn't be able to get that participation points for every 5 races, and he would not be in contention for the championship. So what this does, at least, even if Andres might be about 30 points, 40 points outside the championship right now, he will get those bonus points, and he is still in line for the championship. Obviously, even though he's 40 points out of the championship lead right now, it's race 1. It's going to be a long ARCA season. And I don't think he's out of it yet. But I like the fact that ARCA has that rule because it still guarantees us a fun championship battle. Now, the 01 entry, although it was put through tech by Fast Track Racing, The car actually was from Rev Racing. So that was that caveat, which did leave 40 remaining cars on the entry list. Obviously, ARCA starts 40, so everybody was going to make the race. And all 40, I believe, did show up. All 40, I believe, did show up for the race. We did have one car withdraw from the race. Now, that was the 82 of Kevin Campbell. Now, Kevin did show up to the race. There are pictures of his car sitting in the garage area. However, there was one minor thing wrong with the car. There was no engine in it. There were pictures going around with the car at the track with no engine in it. And so they just must have withdrew, because obviously with no engine, you can't race. So it's that simple. So we were down to 39, which is still a very, very solid field of cars. I think out of the 39 cars, we only had 2 legacy motors. Now, obviously, legacy motors are the motors that can only push about 170 miles per hour by themselves. They're not the mighty Ilmores that can obviously run in the draft. And that was the 06 of AJ Moyer and the 48 of Brad Smith. Everybody else had a motor that was really capable of running in the lead draft. That's how strong this field was. 37 cars had really, really good motors that were capable of hanging in the lead draft. And then, unfortunately, just the 06 and the 48, they just didn't have it. And that's kind of been the problem. AJ was going to get a Elmore for this race, but just some financial issues didn't come in play in time. And, of course, Brad just simply can't afford one. That's just the easiest thing. He just simply can't afford one. Now, to address, before we also get in the entry list, Brad was supposed to bring the 26 car down here, and it was just a case of simply not enough time. But Brad does say that the car is mostly done. The 26 car is mostly done, and we are expected to see it at some points this season, and we might even see the 26 actually be renumbered to the 48. The 48, the Chevrolet, has been run in over 65 straight races across the East Circuit and the main circuit. So Brad might also run the Ford as the number 48 just to give the Chevrolet some time to rest, or I guess you could call it time to rest, and fix some stuff on it, which I think is fair, because, I mean, that car's had 65 straight races, which just shows you the power of a single chassis and the will to compete, which is mad respect. Other notable entry list we had were, of course, Malcolm in the Middle star Frankie Muniz making his big-time stock car debut, driving the 30, driving the famous chassis that Sterling Marlin drove in the 01500, which I think was a cool story. We had 5 women in the field: Mandy Chick, Amber Balkin, Logan Misaraka, Tony Breidinger, and Natalie Decker. That was cool to see. The women getting a big shine in this race. A lot of rookies in the field making their first start. We had a lot of new teams. We had Old Dale Quarterly out there. Just lots of great stories, lots of unexpected stories. And we talked about it back in the Daytona test review, and I didn't do a preview show. But looking at the driver lineup for Daytona, it didn't look like that Venturini was actually going to be the strongest team this year. And boy, did it show during the race. Now, it was no ill respect towards Tony and Amber, but even with that kind of equipment, I just don't feel they have the experience. They would have the experience to lead. I think they could easily run second and third, and maybe push, but I don't think they would have the experience to lead and be able to hold that lead, because they just don't have that experience up front yet. That takes time. You got to build that confidence, build that experience to be able to, lead the pack, and not only lead, but block, stay up front. And I just don't feel that those two ladies had that experience yet. And I really feel like that kind of took Venturini down to just 2 potential race-winning cars in the 25 of Gustine and the 20 of Jesse Love, who, again, although he had run the Daytona test the last couple of years, that was it. He had only run the test. He hadn't actually competed in the race, so he was going in there with no real experience. Even if he had done iRacing, if you've done iRacing, great, but I still don't compare that to the real thing. So he was still a rookie coming into this thing. Gus Dean realistically was the only Venturini car that had previous experience, even though Tony has had previous experience as well, but also had a shot to really win the race, in my opinion. So it was really a kind of an open game of racing, in my opinion. We had lots of cars that could win. You had, like I said, you had Greg Van Alst, the Gibbs entry, the two Siegel entries, Dale Quarterly, who had a former GMS car. You had possibly even Frankie Muniz, who was driving, Mark Rett always brings a good super speedway program. Just had a lot of potential great race winning cars. Now in practice went fairly decent. I was at the track personally, and you guys might have noticed that only 32 cars did take a practice lap. That is because tech took so long. Some cars did not even make a practice lap. Keep in mind, I've done ARCA Tech before, when I've worked with Brad Smith, and it is a very interesting process. It is not like NASCAR Tech in a lot of ways. This is if you guys want to also look at, what old school NASCAR Tech was like back in the day, that is ARCA Tech. ARCA Tech is basically what NASCAR Tech was back in the day. Not the scanning station, not all that crap. So I just think that scanning stuff is really stupid. But ARCA Tech is basically what, NASCAR Tech was like for a long time. And I think really only the truck series kind of still resembles that as well. And it takes a long time. It's a long process. It's where every car in the field, from Brad Smith to Connor Mosack for Gibbs, those cars have to be pristine and near or absolute perfection. They check everything, and it can take a long time. And it took so long that a lot of cars didn't even get a chance to make a practice lap. And their first laps on track were going to be qualifying, which you can't help it. Some of the teams obviously didn't make it through the first time. Some ARCA teams did have to go through a couple of times. But still, I just find that interesting, man. And that even shows you in a series like ARCA, these teams are still trying to get that fine, perfect way to get through tech, bending the rules as much as they can just to get past that template. And some teams, unfortunately, couldn't get on track. But in practice, it was kind of a shocker who won. It wasn't one of the Venturini cars, nor the Gibbs entry. It was Frankie Muniz himself actually won something at Daytona. He won practice, which was something I did not expect to see. I actually didn't even know that until that Saturday, because I was so busy on the 56 truck that I had no idea he had won practice. I thought that was awesome. So cool for Frankie. Connor Mosack was second. Levar Scott was third. Pizza Man Andy Jankowiak was fourth, and Quarterman Dale Quarterly was fifth. Again, like I said, but in terms of practice, they're not in big packs. A lot of it's single car drafting. So races like this, you can't really look at practice results and judge that for the race, because it's going to be a lot different when they're all out there in one big league pack. Same thing goes for qualifying, because ARCA has a unique qualifying for the plate tracks. They don't do it single car qualifying, which I believe they should. I don't see why they couldn't. Maybe because it takes up too much time, I guess, which does make sense. Chuck Buchanan Jr. did not use a legacy motor. That car just experienced issues early. So they pretty much – I'll get to the 87 in a second. I'll explain why that they were so slow. Because they didn't have a legacy. They just had really a lot of bad luck. But we'll get to that in a little bit later. For qualifying, we only had, again, 34 cars. We did have an incident in qualifying that I was there for. Some people say it came from the 15. Some people say it came from the 6 of Jack Wood. Either way, I think it was in Group 3. Group 3, Group 4, I don't remember exactly which one it was. But going up to speed in turn 1, either the 6 or the 15 lost a motor. And unfortunately, it created just so much fluid that the 8 of Sean Core and the 68 of Gage Rogers spun in the oil and crashed into each other in turn 1. Both the 6, the 15, the 68 8 and the 8 were able to return to the pits, but the 6, 15, and 8 returned to the garage. They would not actually complete a qualifying lap, where the 68 came back to pit road, got checked out by Bill Kimmel, and was kind of given the all clear to go back out on track. I believe they said it was like groups of 5, 8 groups of 5, or was it 5 groups of 8? Don't quite remember because, again, we were sitting in truck tech as this was going on, so I couldn't really get a good view. But needless to say, it was the luck of the draw. You had to get the best pack of cars, and some packs were good, some packs were slow. And that really did show in qualifying. Even if you had a strong car, if you didn't have a good pack of cars, you were just not going to get a good lap in. So unshockingly, we had some really strong cars up front with a couple of underdogs. Connor Mosek won the pole handedly by not handily, I guess. He only won it by a couple of hundredths. Jesse Love was second. Jason Kitzmiller for CR7 was third. Ryan Huff was fourth. Always good to see Ryan up there in his own equipment. Andy J was fifth. Robbie Lyons, returning to Bruce Cook's team, was sixth. Greg Van Oust was seventh. Scott Melton was eighth. Logan Misaraka, driving the Jeff Spraker entry, was ninth, and Gus Dean was 10th. Notables down in the field: Frankie Muniz was 16th, low-key in the middle of qualifying. I'm not going to make the joke, though. Other notables, the Mullins entries, they got kind of stuck in a bad group. So they were down 20th and 21st. 34 of our 39 starters ended up taking a qualifying lap. But yeah, we were looking at a very, very good race on Saturday. Obviously, some people were not giving this race some of the best hype, but I was excited. I was honestly excited for this race come Saturday. Like I said, we had a lot of storylines coming into it, a lot of great stories, and it's just the atmosphere was different. It didn't feel like that we were in for just yet another Venturini-dominated race, and I like that. And that's no disrespect to Venturini Motorsports. They've been the best at this for a long time. They're obviously the cars to beat, and they should be. They've been competitive for a long time. But this was one of the first times, since the Gen 5 area, when they were still running the old Gen 4 steel bodies. I would probably say the first time since the Gen 4 era, when ARCA was still running steel bodies, 2017, that I could not predict the winner of this race. Because every year since 2018, I just picked a Venturini car. I didn't exactly pick the driver. I just picked a Venturini car to win. And this was the first time where I honestly could not pick a winner because I didn't feel Jesse had the experience. Gus Dean, could he hold them all off by himself? Greg Van Oust, he's returning. Jason Kitzmiller, he's coming to his own as a play racer. Or could another underdog like Andy J sneak up there? So many different possibilities. You just couldn't predict it. So, come to the grid on Saturday, I was just so excited. Now, I had planned on helping out the 66 NBM team that day. Unfortunately, both NBM cars missed the show, so I kind of just scrambled with some last-minute plans with Brad. I wasn't intending to work with him there. I was just intending to just kind of hang out with him. But I just kind of ended up putting on my gloves on, getting a headset, and was just kind of an honorary crew member for the day with the 48 car. So kind of just watched the race from the pit stall. Race got going, and, I was a little upset, basically not even one lap into the race. We're already wrecking, unfortunately. The 45 Tony Cosentino, I didn't see who he got turned by, but he got turned on the backstretch, and I'm like, please don't hit the wall. This was Tony just started this team, and the last thing they need is to tear up their good super speedway car. Thankfully, he didn't hit anything. Just had to come back and get some fresh tires. But I'm like, oh, no, please. I don't want this to be a wreck fest. We got good cars. We got a good field. I don't want this race to be a wreck fest or be a joke and have it, again, be buried online. I don't want to see that. And thankfully, that didn't happen. Ran our caution laps. Again, 4 laps caution. Not that much. It felt longer than it really should have. Connor Mosek gets back out front, and I'm noticing, usually what we see on these ARCA races is one one line, usually the bottom, will pull ahead of the outside line, but we weren't seeing that. We were seeing side-by-side racing lap after lap after lap. And it wasn't just like nobody was doing anything. People were, how they say, jockeying for position. This was good racing, man. Like I've criticized the super speedway package in the past for being a little boring. I don't know what they've changed, but it has worked. We saw some, even if it was only for a couple of laps, some fantastic side-by-side racing, some comers and goers. And the outside line, even with only a couple of cars, was able to prevail. 6 laps later, they were just kind of running in the lead draft. The outside line had started to kind of fail at that point. The 18 of Mosak was reigning supreme. On the outside line, though, coming down the backstretch on lap 11, lap 12, I forgot which one it was, the 69 of Scott Melton, he just can't buy a break. I love Bryce Hodgeberg, had him on the show last year. He bumped into him a couple too many times. I could see it on the backstretch. He hit him, I think Scott said twice. I saw only a couple times. But the one time he hit him, it hooked him right into the wall. And I feel so bad for the Kimmels. It always seems to be Scott Melton and the Kimmels that get wrecked, whether it's Will driving or Scott driving. And it's never really their fault. It's never really their fault. And unfortunately, just bad luck bug hit him again, which sucks because Scott was driving a beautiful metallic blue wrap, probably one of the best looking Kimmel cars they've ever ran. And, we're 14 laps into the race. What are we doing bumping each other this hard? Now, again, it's like, well, it's ARCA, it's a joke. No, it's not, okay? And I'll give Bryce a pass. He's a rookie. He's only run this race a couple of times. But I don't know, you got to think maybe instead of just going up there and bumping him, maybe just letting off the gas a little bit and just kind of riding. Again, we're 12 laps into the race. We don't need to be bumping each other this hard. So it's all right. I just felt for Scott Melton. And, watching him get out of the car, he was hot. He was fuming. Rule number 1, to the track workers, when a driver gets out of the car, don't touch him. Just don't touch him, especially when they had as good of a car as they did. They had a good piece, and it just sucks for Kimmel Racing. I've been a huge fan of the Kimmels for a long time. I'm a big Will Kimmel fan. Anytime Will gets to drive, you guys will always see it on my Twitter. I'm always happy for them because they work so hard. And it's just like Scott Melton just can't buy any luck. So, and I hate that for them. I'm sure they'll be back at Talladega, but they didn't even get out of the box. Like I said, 12 laps into the race, not even out of the box, not even a chance for the race to get going. So that kind of sucked. Laid down a lot of speedy dry because it basically punctured every fluid tank that was in the car. I think they said the oil tank, radiator, a lot of fluid was laid down. And I'm like, oh boy, because usually when they lay down fluid, all that speedy dry comes up, and that creates another crash. Thankfully, the Daytona track crew actually did a very, very good job of cleaning up the race. It was taking so long, though. I'm glad they did this, too. After 6 laps of caution, or I think it was only 4, they red flagged it, which I like. Now, only an 80-lap race. We don't need to be wasting any more time than we have to clean this up. So stop the race, take the time to clean it up, and then we get back going again, and that's what I like. And again, the same thing that I'd mentioned earlier, we saw again, the inside line, which normally gets the best on the restart, it wasn't happening. And the 97 of Jason Kitzmiller is hanging right there. Greg Van Alst is hanging right there with him. Even though Mosak is strong on the bottom, Kitzmiller's only got a couple of cars there with him. And to my absolute shock, Jason Kitzmiller takes the lead and holds it. And I'm astonished because we have not seen much out of Jason Kitzmiller in his ARCA run. He either crashes or he runs good. That's kind of what we've seen out of him. He either has a great finish or he crashes. And I was pleasantly shocked with how well he was running in this race. And I was so proud of him at the same time because, a lot of people rag on him. A lot of people, say he shouldn't be racing. But, he went up there and took the lead. I'm like, that is so impressive. And his pit box was not too far from us. And I've never seen such a crowd of people go so wild on a pit box for someone taking the lead. And it was such good to see. I'm like, man, we haven't even seen a Venturini car in the top 3 yet because Jesse fell back at the start. I mean, we have not even seen a Venturini car contend for the lead yet. And again, I'm not trying to be rude to Venturini, but we're seeing different cars than Venturini competing for the lead. And that's what I wanted to really see out of this race. And we are. The 97 of Jason Kitzmiller, the 35 of Greg Van Oust, the 18 of Connor Mosack, the 42 of Robbie Lyons, both of the Rev cars. I mean, Sean Corr, just so many possible winners. And your excitement keeps building up, But they're there. They are right there, the 25. And I'll even give credit. Amber was running in the top 10 a lot of this race as well. And, of course, Jesse was right up there in the top 10 as well. So they might not have been the top 3, but don't think that Venturini wasn't lurking. My apologies. Someone has pointed out in the chat, yes, we did actually have a part of that lap 1 incident with the 45. We did have a DNF. The 57, Brian Dowsett, Brother-in-Law Motorsports, brung 2 cars to this race. Actually, I'm kind of glad you brought that up in the chat, Tyler, because I don't know if you guys have heard the story. So basically, Brian Dowsett had a rough Daytona. The ARCA car came loose. Depending on from what you hear, either the ARCA car came loose or the truck came loose in the hauler and collided into each other. So when they unloaded the cars, the 75 had a punched-in nose, and the 28 truck had a damaged bumper before the race weekend even started. Isn't that great? I'm like, oh, only that can happen to poor Brian. Like, somebody forgot to strap down the cars correctly. And whoever that was, I would not have wanted to have been around there. But the 57 was being driven by rookie Hunter Deschantel, and the car came by us, and his radiator was all punched in. I felt bad for him because, only 3 laps. You deserve more laps than that in your debut. Radiator was leaking really badly, all pushed in, so his race was over, unfortunately, early. But good catch, because I forgot to go over that. So by this point, Hunter was out of the race in the 57. The 69 of Scott Melton was out. The 36 of Ryan Huff, you haven't heard me mention him. Unfortunately, he lost the clutch pretty much right at the start of the race, coasted down pit road, actually stopped just before our pit box, and his crew had to go push him. They went under the hood, tried to get it fixed, but one of the Ilmore crew members gave the sign, and unfortunately also Ryan Huff's race was over as well, which was a shame because he was a race-winning contender. So that had knocked out a couple more cars. And unfortunately, during this time, we saw one of Venturini's, in my opinion, the favorite to win this race, Gus Dean, not only on pit road, behind the wall, fuel line, fuel pickup issues, a very rare, mechanical issue for a Venturini car, something we rarely see. A mechanical issue, which is something we rarely see with a Venturini car nowadays. But the 25 behind the wall, and in my opinion, like I said, he was the favorite to win, in my opinion. And I'm like, wow, the 25 has gone behind the wall. The possibilities, again, are endless to know who can win this race. The possibilities are absolutely endless to who can now win this race. So we left up at around lap 25. The 97 had just taken the lead. Kitzmiller, and he's holding the lead strong. By this point, again, after about 3 or 4, about 5 laps, the outside line starts to dissipate a little bit. We're kind of getting down to single car line on the bottom for about the first 6, 7 cars, and then they kind of dissipate into a side-by-side pack. And we were riding along, and then coming off of turn number 4, they had caught the 48 and the 06, and they literally caught Brad in the worst spot. I'm sure you guys saw it on TV. they caught Brad entering the tri-oval, and Brad was literally saying on the radio he was really nervous. What was happening with us was the 48 car, we were not quick. The motor had basically started to lay down at the beginning of the race. And that doesn't necessarily mean we weren't blowing up. We weren't leaking fluid. We weren't blowing up. The motor laying down, it just means we're going slower and slower and slower. That's what laying down is. We were just going slower and slower and slower and slower, to the point where the 06 car was almost a second a lap faster than us. I mean, we were barely pulling 161 around the track. And I think that's just because our motor, again, it's just old. It just wasn't ready. I mean, heck, I don't know if Brad would like me talking about this, but Brad actually did practice in qualifying with no brakes. No brake pads. It was bare metal on the brakes. So the car could stop. It probably just would have blown all of our eardrums out. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I just did. So thought that was kind of a funny story because Brad had an issue getting his brake pads in time. So he had to do practice and qualifying without brakes. So thought that was interesting. He did get them for the race, though. He didn't run the whole weekend without brakes. He did run the race with brakes. But poor Brad, they caught him coming right into the tri-oval. And, Brad just had no idea what to do. He tried to go down on the apron, but you can't do that. And it shot him right back up into the field. Luckily, a crash didn't happen. And he took the smart route and just rode the apron coming around turns 1 and 2. Unfortunately, AJ Moyer didn't have the better luck coming off of turns 3 and 4. AJ, looking back on it, people ragged him for not holding his line. He could have been a little bit lower. Yes, I agree. He could have been a little bit lower. But it wasn't as bad as I thought because I personally didn't see how high he was. And unfortunately, it resulted in a crash with Tim Richmond and Jesse Love. The other Venturini bullet was also involved in the crash. Jesse sustained some decent damage, and poor Tim Richmond, the DGR car is dead. Tim took a hard hit to the wall, which really sucks, man. Ever since his Michigan crash, it's like, man, Tim Richmond and Richmond Racing just can't buy a break. Any race they try to run, it's either bad luck. They crashed in practice at Iowa. They crashed in practice at Salem. They just haven't had any luck. And it's really sad because, I was talking to his father, David Richmond, and they had a great piece. He was extremely confident in the car. A-class motor, A-class drafting speeds. I mean, they were third fastest in single car speeds throughout the weekend. And it just sucks to see now that car is all torn up. It really does. So that was kind of sad to see Tim's day end like that. Again, people ragged on the 06 for not holding his line. I don't really know how to call it. I still don't know really how to call it. I think the 06 could have been a little bit lower. Yes. Some people said he should have been on the apron. Again, you can't really be on the apron in the corners. And coming off of turn 4, you can't just go from the banking immediately to the apron. If he had tried to do that, the 06 would have wrecked himself. The 06 would have wrecked himself. So, unfortunately, I call it a racing deal. I honestly do call it a racing deal. And I was going back with some and forth with some people, about, should the 06 and the 48 even be out there if they don't have the substantial motor? I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question for sure. I think it could have an argument. If you don't have a substantial motor, should you still be allowed to race at Daytona? But I fear if they pass tech, then they're allowed to race. And that's how I call it. No matter what motor is under the hood, if that car clears tech, then they are allowed to race. And sorry, I think that's just how it is. If that car is cleared to race by officials, then the car should be allowed to race. When that car is not allowed to race by officials, then it shouldn't be allowed to race. That simple. That's my take personally on it. So it took a while to clean this one up. Got back to again on lap 38. By this point, they had traded the lead a couple times. A couple of cars had come in early. Obviously, with Daytona, you only have to make really one pit stop for tires. So some teams had chosen to come down on this caution. which left Sean Corr and Christian Rose as the leaders. Sean would take the lead on the restart, of course. He led 5 laps. Christian was able to get out front for a couple. Again, like what I said in the last couple of restarts, we continued to see side-by-side racing for the front. One specific lane of cars couldn't get out front, and it was just so heartwarming to see. Really, really good plate racing in this series, which we have not seen a lot of the last couple of years. But we were seeing really, really good racing, comers and goers, and people who honestly had good cars were flying through the field. The rev cars started to go to the back of the field. They were making their way up through the pack, which was really, really good to see. I don't remember they didn't specify which lap it was, but Dale Quarterly, I love Dale Quarterly. We all love Dale Quarterly, but he was kind of a mess in this race. He was bumping people left and right and about pushed Toni Breidinger completely off the track. I mean, going into turn 3 on one lap, he pushed her so hard, she tried to go under the 15. Well, they're about to enter the corner, so the 15 angles her car. Amber angles her car to, get ready for the turn, and Tony's under her, and so Toni is about to, and she's on the apron right as they go into the turn, and I thought we were about to have an oh shit moment. I'm like, God, no, not Toni. Not Toni and Amber. It wasn't even their faults. And thankfully, Toni was able to get back up onto the track without any serious damage. But Quarterly was a mess out there. He just about caused a huge one because and Toni did nothing wrong. I mean, you can't. She was sent into the corner, and you have to go for the position. So, I felt for Toni there. I felt for Toni and Amber. They did nothing wrong in that situation. It was just Dale pushing the crap out of them, and it would eventually come back to bite Dale Quarterly. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So, 3 laps later, on lap 38, it wasn't really specified who exactly spun him out, but the 7 car spun out. Eric Caudell, great to see him back after his horrible Talladega crash last year. No real damage to the car. They got the accident quickly cleaned up, went back to green on lap 46. At this point, Jason Kitzmiller and Greg Van Alst were competing for the lead. And you notice, again, I have not said a Venturini car that led this race. And just to skip ahead, Venturini did not lead a single lap in this race. Now, when was the last time that happened? The last time a Venturini car did not lead a single lap in the Daytona race, I can't remember. I mean, that really showed the strongness of this field of cars. Guys like Jason Kitzmiller, guys like Greg Van Alst, who are just up there and they're battling for their lives out there. It was just awesome to see. Absolutely awesome. They went back green after the Caudell crash. Not one lap later, the 18 of Connor Mosack, sorry about that, was sent into the grass. Now, ARCA does not have splitters. I call them splitter skirts. Brad and I, we call them splitter skirts, but they are called front valences. They are plastic noses that you screw on. Some of them are screwed in. Some of them are T-handled in. And they're plastic. They're not really hard plastic. And they're made to give way. It's not like a rugged piece of metal that's going to dig into the grass and rip the whole nose off. That's why you don't see that in ARCA. And that's why you didn't see that happen to the 18 car. When he was going through the grass, it was just that plastic buckling. You probably didn't notice that on camera, but that's more than likely what was happening, was just the plastic valence of that car buckling in the grass. And thankfully, it didn't tear the nose off the car, and the car was just fine. And that's the benefit of not running spoilers. You don't tear the nose off the car. And thankfully for the 18 car, all he had to do was come down, get another set of tires. I think they just bolted on the tires that they had taken off from the previous caution, and Connor was just fine again. That simple. So at that point, we had still had almost every car on the track was on the lead lap. I think, us, Brad Smith and the guys, we were the only car a lap down. Some of the cars that were struggling in this race, Miguel Gomes in the 0-2, they had struggled mightily during the race. They wasn't shown on TV, I bet, but they were on pit road just numerous times. The 25 of Gus Dean did get back out on track for about 10 more laps. And then, unfortunately, the fuel line happened again, and they just went ahead and retired. Eric Caudell's car, after his spin, unfortunately had an engine issue, so they were done for the day. The 12 of Zach Herron, he had also had some issues throughout the day, and they would eventually retire. But yeah, so we're coming up to lap 50. Everybody had pitted by this point. I mean, and the race is on. Think about this. Lap 50, 30 laps to go. No Venturini cars are in sight to win this race. Amber Bakken is in the top 10, and Jesse had made his way back up to about outside of the top 10 as well. But I just look at Jesse's car, and I'm like, he just has too much damage. I don't think if Jesse got out front that he would have been able to keep the lead. I don't think he would have been able to keep the lead had he gotten out front, because the too much aerodynamic damage would have slowed him down too much. But the race got going again. Greg Manaus led the field. And how about this for a shocker? In his debut, Levar Scott takes the lead. And I didn't even know. I forgot he was driving the car. I had no idea, honestly, who was driving the 2 car for a second. I had to go back and look at the entry list. And I'm like, wow. You know, for a guy who hasn't done a lot on plate tracks, Levar really knows what he's doing out there. I mean, he was making moves left and right, on the bottom, on the top. It was like, man, here we are. Just different people up front making these great moves. We're not wrecking like everybody thought we would. We're putting on great racing, you know, and that's what I want to see so much. And everyone's like, well, the average green flag run was 4.5 laps. We had a lot of yellows in this race. Fine. The race is only 80 laps long. What are you going to do? You know, when you have a race that's only 80 laps and you have like 6 yellows in it, obviously a lot of that race is going to be taken up by caution laps. It just is. That's how it works, unfortunately, whether you like it or not. I wish this race was a little bit longer. Yes, I do. I wish this race was the same distance as the truck race. I wish this race was 100 laps rather than 80, because I feel like it would give the race more time to play out and breathe. So we ran 3 laps, and we had some amazing racing coming off of turn 4, the 73 of Andy J. Poor Andy J. He had been running up top 10, top 5 all day. Unfortunately, got put in the middle, kind of got sandwiched between the 15 of Balkan and the 15 of Balkan and the 4 of Dale Quarterly. The 15 of Balkan actually got turned, I believe, by Frankie Muniz into the 44 of Jason White, which then shot her into, I think, the 73. And the 73, although he kept going, like we didn't crash, but the 73's rear bumper came off, which unfortunately just destroyed. I mean, the bumper was hit by like 3 or 4 cars, destroyed the 87's nose. We hit it too. The 48 hit it. We were scared to death that we just blew the radiator out. So thankfully we didn't. The 87 car suffered a lot of damage, actually ran the rest of the race without a grill, which was even bigger risk, running Daytona with no grill cover. Grill was wide open. And then I think they eventually got called back to the pits and put a very, very flimsy mesh wire over the grill cover, because I think you're required to run with one. But I felt for Andy J there, and I apparently I guess there was enough damage. They had to retire from the race, which again just sucks because Andy J puts so much financial effort into these races. Just to see him get taken out was really sad to see. You know, Wheeling has really stepped up with their program, and it's just great to see, because you look at where Andy J came from a couple years ago, and you look at him now, it's just an owner driver who's worked his effing ass off, and look where he is now. You just don't see that in these other divisions. You kind of see in the truck series sometimes, but I feel like it's stories like that that you really can only see in the ARCA series. So we got all that cleaned up, ran 2 more laps, another debris caution, not really remembering why. At this point, their lead was being traded back by Levar, Scott, and Greg Van and Jason White. Not Jason White, who drove the gun broker car. Jason White, who the Canadian Jason White, who drives for Josh Rayom in the Truck Series. I know, right? I'm like, Jason White's up here? Like, what? I got a friend, I don't know if you guys know Gabriel Wood. He works for Alpha Prime Racing. He was fueling that car, and I'm like, oh, man, Gabe could get a win. And Jason White was running the race of his career. I had no idea he had that in him. I had no idea he had that kind of talent in him. And I guess it's fair because, I mean, you know, his truck, I mean, Jason White's truck was in pieces. They barely made the start of the race. That truck was so slow. He did a good job with it with what he could, but my God, he ran the race of his career. Absolutely ran the race of his career and took the lead and held it. Not for just 2 or 3 laps. He held it for 12 laps straight. Coming back to grid on lap 65, we ran 8 laps, and by then, Dale Quarterly's bumping days finally came to an end. He got turned going down the front stretch again with the front splitter skirts. Didn't dig in, so it didn't tear up the grass that bad. Didn't tear up the nose, and Dale was able to keep going. But Dale finally got his comeuppance. He was bumping people all over the place, and he got a taste of his own medicine, how they say it. So that kind of sucked for Dale Quarterly because obviously, you know, we all know the quote, raise hell orderly, praise Dale Quarterly. So that kind of sucked to see, but luckily Dale, spoiler alert, Dale was able to recover to finish 10th. So here we go. Final 3 laps. Can Jason White do it? Or can Greg Van Oust win? I'm like, this is our front row with 3 laps to go and not a Venturini car in sight. Let's go. Who's going to get it? Jason White got a great restart. Jason White got a great restart. Greg Van Oust was right there with him on the bottom. It looked like it was going to be, Jason White. He had the help on the bottom from Levar Scott and Connor Mosack. They came to the white flag. We even saw Jesse Love make an appearance. He was getting pushed by the 15 of Amber Balkin and the 6 of Jack Wood. And they were just making all these mad dashes. And everyone's like, oh, I bet they're going to crash. I bet they're going to crash. Spoiler alert, they didn't crash. Coming down the backstretch, I noticed the 44 got just a little bit too far out front, and that's all Greg Van Oust needed. He got that final shove from, I think it was the 18 of Mosack, went to the outside line, made a beautiful move, and unfortunately for Jason White, nobody went with him. I mean, he couldn't even finish second. Literally nobody went with this guy, and poor Jason had to settle for 9th. I'm like, oh, you don't even get to finish second at least, all the way back down to 9th, and despite a late race maneuvers from Connor Mosack, it wasn't enough. Greg Van Oust wins at Daytona, and I just couldn't be any more happier. My heart was broken for Jason White, but at the same time, we got an equally as popular and deserving winner of this race. Greg Van Oust, who, you know, his story is so good. You know, he was doing this in his 20s, late teens, early 20s, got out of it because it was just financially, it just wasn't enough at that time. He built a company, built his own funding, and now he's back in the series full-time. And just the emotion from his team, the emotion from his pit crew, the emotion from Greg himself cannot do it justice. I'm going to sit here silent for a second, and I'm simply going to just play Greg's interview from the race. So this was Greg Van Oust's winning interview, and man, like, we hear all these young kids give these bland, not really emotional interviews, which I've been a little bit critical on sometimes. A lot of people have been critical on sometimes. And in my opinion, this race-winning interview really, really shows what a real emotion should be when winning a race like this. So just got to take a listen. I can't show the footage, but I can at least have you guys listen to it.
So good.
See that vein popping out of his head?
Guys like me are supposed to do this.
That's awesome.
Let's get it down to
He wants that
Jamie.
flag.
Take it in, Jamie. As Greg Van Hoss climbed out of that car, he said, guys like me are not supposed to be able to do this. He collects the checkered flag. I'm not sure you can put it into words, but the emotion that you're feeling right now, how much heart went into this win?
Oh, it's everything I got. It's the only speedway car we got. There's no way I was going to bring it home without the steering wheel of the trophy, and that was it. This is for all the short track racers out there that don't think you can get to this level. I've worked my ass off to get here, and we did it! Yeah!
Raw emotion. And that is what I love to see. Guys like me are not supposed to win. This is for the short track racers out there. I worked my whole life for this. And it's quotes like that you love it. You absolutely love it. And, you know, it's just, you can't put it into words. Moments like that, you just don't see that in the Cup Series. You rarely see that in the Xfinity Series. You rarely see that in the Truck Series. And you do rarely see it in the ARCA Series from time to time too. But this is a series where moments like that are more than likely to happen. And when a moment like that happens, you know, you see these bland interviews that some of these kids deliver. They don't really know what it's really like to, you know, sacrifice as much, maybe as a Greg Van Oust. And the raw emotion of that victory, the raw emotion of that interview was just 10 out of 10. Gotta love it. And I mean, that's a race car driver. To me, that is the raw emotion that embodies a real, true race car driver, that every driver should strive to have that kind of emotion when you win a race. And as much as I felt for Jason White, I could not be any happier for Greg Van Oust getting that win, and just his second full-time season return to the ARCA Series. Oh, you know, I was so emotional. I was emotional myself because it's moments like these are why I still support this series so much. You know, it was one for the smaller organizations. This guy doesn't have a hauler. Greg Van Oust does not have a hauler. He has just, I think, a toter home-based hauler, which not even a full-size toter home. You know, I mean, this guy does with what he can. So, yeah, it's just, and meanwhile, we had chaos behind the field. So Greg Van Oust gets the win. The 66 of John Garrett had ran a great race all day. He unfortunately gets turned, was running top 10, gets turned, unfortunately. So he goes from basically a top 10 finish all the way down to 25th. It was also at this point, Frankie Muniz, he had actually run as high as third at one point in this race, but had to come down pit road. He recovered to finish 11th. Jason White, of course, fell down to 9th. Mandy Chick finished 5th. What a great run for her. Amber Balkin finished 6th. I'll give a shout out to her too. She ran a great race. Jesse Love ended up 7th. Jack Wood was 8th. Dale Corley rounded up the top 10. Sean Cord, despite the damaged replaceable nose, they literally finished decaling that car 25 minutes before qualifying. Levar Scott, great run for him too, finishing 4th. Some other good runs. Stephen Lewis, who had purchased RSS's old ARCA car. Stephen Lewis, you might not know his name. I don't know him either. But he purchased RSS's old ARCA car and got a very, very solid 13th place finish. Unfortunately for Jason Kitzmiller, who was very competitive earlier in the race, finished 19th. Willie Mullins just couldn't seem to find the right draft the whole race, finished a disappointing, in my opinion, 20th. Brayton Laster, the other pizza man, he sustained some pretty serious nose damage, which really hurt his drafting, finishing down in 27th. The 5 women in the race, Mandy Chick finished 5th, Amber Balkin finished 6th, Natalie Decker finished 14th, Logan Misaraka finished 18th. That car kept jumping out of gear, so she probably could have ran a lot better than what she actually ran, and Tony Breidinger finished 23rd. Overall, I get this race. I honestly give this race a 10 out of 10. I honestly do. I honestly do. I'm not trying to be biased. I honestly give this race a 10 out of 10. You had your crashes. We had great racing, and we had an unbelievable popular winner and a great underdog story. Two underdog organizations fighting it out for the last lap. I mean, like I said, you look at it, the 44 car. That's Jeff McClure's team. Two underdog organizations fighting it out on the last lap for the win. That's what I want to see. And that's something that you just will not see in the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and especially the Cup Series on tracks like this. You just won't see that. In my opinion, this is one of the few ARCA races that I will ever give 10 out of 10. I don't give 10 out of 10 to many races. This was a 10 out of 10 entertainment ARCA race. And for all the people that crap on ARCA, this was the only damn race of the weekend that actually finished under green. Don't count the duels because those are preliminary races. This was the only big race of the weekend that actually finished under green. So for all the NASCAR fans who crap on the series, well, what do you got to say about that? And I guarantee you, had that truck race gotten back underway, it still would have finished under caution. Still would have finished under caution. So I don't want to hear any more of that ARCA crap. We put on a great race, and I will go on to say that we put on the second best race of the weekend right behind the Daytona 500. Daytona 500 was a fantastic race. ARCA race, in my opinion, was second best. I don't want to hear anyone tell me that the Xfinity race later that night was better, because it wasn't. We didn't have any freight train racing. We had underdogs competing for the win. Xfinity race this year, probably one of the most little involvement from underdogs I had ever seen. The last two ARCA races have been absolute bangers. This race was a banger. The finale last year at Toledo, a banger. So for everyone who is saying that the series is dead, the series is dying, where's your proof? Where is your proof? Give me your proof that the series is dying. Yeah, that's right. It's not. All right. From where we were back in 2019 and 2020, this series has improved in car counts, racing entertainment, and has produced some great stars. So I'm just tired of all the crap this series gets. But yeah, so just an overall great race. One of the few ARCA races I will ever give 10 out of 10. Because, I mean, it's hard for a race to be a 10 out of 10. It really is. But I just can't say that this race was wasn't more than a 10 out of 10. It absolutely was. Absolutely was. Some other stories in the field to note. Andy Hillenberg, he always brings a big class of cars. The highest finishing Hillenberg entry was 16th with Bryce Hogberg. Tony Cosentino recovered to finish 15th, which I thought was pretty impressive for that debut organization. Gage Rogers, who was having motor issues all day, finished 26th. We actually failed to finish. If you guys wanted an update for the 48, we did fail to finish. The car was finally laying it down enough that I don't think we got parked. I think Brad just knew. He knew it. So we just went ahead and parked. Brad also was physically exhausted. It was a long weekend for him, and he was just physically exhausted. So it was just easier to park. We weren't going to gain any more spots, so it was just easier to park the car. So while we are listed as running at the finish, we weren't. We should be listed, unfortunately, as a DNF. But yeah, so Daytona was so great to us. Just an overall great race, great trip. The emotion in Victory Lane. I got to sneak into the media center for about the last 5 minutes of Greg's interview. And it's just the emotion. I mean, he didn't even know where to go in the media center, which was even more funny. And just the raw emotion in that interview, in his interview on the front stretch and his interview in the media center, it truly embodies what a real race car driver should be, and in my personal opinion. And, you know, the one thing that frustrated me the most, Lionel Racing didn't make a diecast. And I actually praise Greg Van Oust for calling out Lionel Racing on Twitter, saying, "Where's my diecast?" So they're trying to work on it, and I'm telling you, everyone who watches this show, if Greg Van Oust gets a diecast with this Daytona race version, we have to make sure that it gets made. We have to make sure that it makes the mock, because a win like this, they don't come a lot. So to see an underdog driver get a win, I don't want to see a person just make a custom out of this. I want to see this diecast get produced, whether it be the 164th version or the 124th version. We have to get this diecast produced in some capacity because a win like this should be remembered for a long time. Everybody at ARCA should be proud of that race. Every driver in the field, I feel like, really put on a great showing and did the best to their ability. And that's what you want to see out of every single driver in the field. And what did I see when they were pushing that 35 car back to the garage area after that race? Nothing but congratulations, smiling faces. Everybody, maybe except for Venturini and KBM, and maybe even for Bill Venturini, because, you know, he supports the lower guys. He helps the lower guys out when they do need it. There was not one person in that garage who I can honestly say, probably other than Jason White, that wasn't happy seeing the 35 team win that race. Absolutely. And I did have the opportunity to catch up with Jason White. You can actually find that on my channel. I was actually capturing his live post-race reactions. I posted that video to Twitter. Jason just, I mean, you could see the frustration, grabbing his head, throwing the wheel. I mean, the frustration was real. And again, I love seeing that raw emotion, not just accepting the fact that you lost the race, you know, accepting the fact that you lost the race. You're mad, you're frustrated. Show that emotion. But for Jason White, be proud. You ran the race of your career and you earned the respect of a lot more people than I really think you didn't. Trust me. Jason White, you earned a lot more fans than you think you did that day. A lot more people are going to respect you. A lot more people are going to take you more seriously. A lot of people are going to look at you in a better light. Jason White has nothing to be ashamed of. He ran the race of his career. And I hope that he can return to that car at Talladega. He wants to. I really hope he can. And it makes me wonder what this guy could really do in some good truck equipment. If he can run that good in an ARCA car, maybe let's see if we can get him into a better, no disrespect to Rayon Brothers Racing, but let's see if we can get him into a better truck as well. Point standings for this race have not been really officially posted yet. We do know Greg Van Oust is leading. Right now, he would hold, I believe, maybe around a 10-point lead over the 20 of Jesse Love. So right now, our championship is actually being led by Greg Van Oust as well. Andres Perez de Lara, he'll be around 40 points behind. But again, we have a long season to go, 19 other races. So even though Andres is 40 points out, I don't see that as a problem because he could easily recover that at Talladega. Easily could. Other full-timers that kind of struggle in this race, Frankie Muniz right now will be listed as third in points, about maybe around 15 behind. Tony Cosentino actually will be listed top 5 in points as well right now. So, again, obviously you can't really get a good look at the point standings right now. We have to maybe wait a couple races because we have some part-time cars. Obviously, Daytona's not everyone who's running Daytona is going to run full-time. So we do have to wait around maybe 3 to 4 races as usual to really get a good look at the point standings, who's going to run full-time, who's going to run the majority of the schedule, and who's just going to run part-time. Mandy Chick wants to run the whole year, but they did say that they were skipping Phoenix. I hope she can still maybe she can at least do a start and park for Andy. Just get to Phoenix somehow so we can keep you in the championship hunt. Because obviously races like, you know, the road courses, the dirt tracks, and the race all the way out in Phoenix, it's a long haul for these ARCA teams. It's not easy for them. So I hope that Mandy can put together a deal to at least maybe do a start and park or do something. Just keep herself in the championship hunt because I don't want to see her have to skip one race and have it ruin her entire year. Because right now, if she can find a ride for Phoenix and commit to a whole season, she's second in points right now. Second in points. So theoretically, second in points. People in the chat asking about Brad. Again, the motor, it was just the oil belt, the oil pump belt. Again, the motor didn't blow, so that's not a big issue. It was just the oil belt that was going bad, and some more internal issues that were causing the car to slow down. Brad's had to deal with that issue before. He can get it fixed. It wouldn't shock me, though, if we see Brad in the Ford as early as Phoenix. We could see that at the same time. Obviously, Phoenix, he never runs the full race because it's a big field of cars. You don't want to wreck the car, so he'll obviously start and park Phoenix. I don't think he'll run the Ford at Talladega, but I do see him bringing the Ford at Kansas. That I could see to be the first race for the Ford. Not really sure. I'm not really sure which race we will see the Ford debut at, but Brad will be running the full schedule again. Rest assured, you don't have to worry. All Brad Smith will be there. I just wish he had a better motor. Even his legacy motor just has a lot of miles on it, but a series like that, you just won't see that in the trucks. You won't see a guy like Brad Smith in the trucks. I mean, I guess you could say the same for Norm Benning. Norm Benning's actually looking at running full time. I don't know if you guys saw that in the news. Norm Benning's actually looking at trying to run full time in the trucks this year. That's 71. Oh, I would love to see that happen. But just overall, a great race. Nothing to be ashamed of for anything. No real negative moments. For all the people that are still bashing this series, just call them haters at this point. Everybody in ARCA should be proud of that race. 10 out of 10 race. And I don't say that very often for ARCA races. 10 out of 10, absolutely. So, some more other news we'll go over very briefly. So that is our Daytona race review. Some other news that I still want to go over just very quickly for on the West Circuit. Sebastian Arias, Rev Racing will actually expand to the West Division with Sebastian Arias. He will run for them 2 races this season at Sonoma and the finale at Phoenix. And Naki Kluwer Motorsports will take over the number 88 from the old BMI racing team that Bridget Burgess used to run. They will take over the number 88. That Bradley Erickson will run full-time in 2023 with along Joey East, I believe, will also be running for the team as well. Details in that program are later to be finalized. Trevor Huddleston and Huddleston Motorsports, they will run full-time as well in the West Circuit. They are believed to either run 1 or 2 cars, those cars coming from the previous Sunrise Ford team. And also, I believe they purchased one of the new ARCA teams also purchased an ex-DGR car as well from the Fords. And Tyler Reff, the brother of Tanner Reff driving for Bill McNally. Tyler Reff was testing at the Las Vegas Bull Ring with Loudon Jackson Motorsports and is expected to run the whole season for them as well. So the ARCA West Division, while the East Division still might not look in perfect, the ARCA West Division is still looking very, very strong for 2023 as well. And the news for the ARCA series just keeps looking good. I know car counts are still not going to be the highest as what we want to see them at, but in terms of all 3 divisions, ARCA is still looking really, really strong, and it's something that I'm sure we're all happy to see. Wow, what a long review. 1 hour and 8 minutes. I thank all of you who have been with me this long. And I also want to thank all of you who, my new subscribers, longtime subscribers, 943 subs, man. We are less than 100 away. We are 57 away from the magic number 1,000. Remember, guys, we're having a huge giveaway. 5 prizes that range from 124 scale cars to 164 scale cars to even and remember, our top prize to one lucky subscriber will be a number 7 Takuma Koga promo car. And apparently, is that the real Derek Cope in the chat? Apparently, good evening. I'll be running Rick Ware this season starting at Atlanta. Is that the real Derek? Derek, is that the real you in the chat? Oh, God. Dang it. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome though if that was the real Derek Cope? I mean, if it is the real Derek Cope, that'd be nice. But I don't know. I don't know if you guys are seeing this in the chat right now. I was about to do my closeout. Well, that's a fun way to end the show. I hope that's the real Derek Cope. But that'd be cool if it was a real Derek Cope, because I would like to see him return in the series. I would, but no, that'd be. Didn't expect that to happen. So hey, we're live. So what do you expect to happen, folks? But in all seriousness, I want to thank you guys. 943 subs. I mean, at this point last year, we had barely just broken 100 at this point last year. And, I know, obviously, I've talked about, my personal life hasn't been the best lately. Still trying to put myself back together after some tough times. But I thank you guys for staying with me through these tough times. I thank you guys for continuing to support the channel, growing the channel to almost hitting 1,000 subs. I mean, when I started this podcast, I didn't have any live viewers, and I would get only about 25, 50 views. Now, I mean, at one point we peaked at 25 live viewers, and we still got 15 of you guys watching me live. And I can't thank you guys enough for that. But let's get to that magic number 1,000. I want to give away these 5 great prizes for you guys for your continued support. In terms of what I have planned this season, we will be doing obviously our preview shows every Wednesday, continuing that. And backmarker battles will be full-time. Yes, backmarker battles is back for this season. We will be doing that every Thursday. So every Wednesday and Thursday, you'll get a preview shows. And then the next week, you'll get the reviews. So tomorrow, we will be back with backmarker battles. We have a lot to talk about there because all the backmarkers that happen in the Truck Series, Cup Series, and Xfinity Series seasons, the bonuses on how that's all going to work out, we'll all get to that tomorrow. So join me tomorrow, not 6 p.m. Wednesdays, I have to do it at 6 because usually I have some stuff to do around 7:30 with my brother in his shop. But tomorrow we will be live at 7. So mark your calendars, or I guess mark your clocks or alarms, whatever you got, for tomorrow at 7 p.m. and join me tomorrow for backmarker battles. You guys have a great rest of your Wednesday night. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I wouldn't do now. And I will catch you guys tomorrow with backmarker battles. I've been Colby Evans. This has been the ARCA Racing Podcast, and I am signing off. Salute you guys. So long.